Are you okay? Is everyone fine? Margot, if you would, I think you could sit outside and have some food. Would you like to have food, or do you consider that a bribe? And therefore you cannot write honestly, or therefore you have to write a bad story? Okay, because if you'd like, would you like something to eat at this time? Yes or no? You can speak.
Yes, sir.
Yes? Okay. Margot,
Yes, sir.
take them outside, tell the chef, serve them a little lunch, okay?
Thank you, press.
Thank you, press. Thank you, press. Thank you, guys. Thank you, guys. Thank you, press. Thank you, press.
That should
Please leave the way
guarantee
you
good
came.
stories,
Thank
but
you,
it
press.
won't.
Thank you, guys. Please don't.
They'll only get worse.
I
Should go out of their way to make them worse. She gave us a hamburger. We have to make them. While we're talking.
President Trump, some are saying that the recent attacks in the past couple of days on that Russia's staged against Ukraine shows that President Putin isn't serious about things. What is your reaction to that?
No, he's very serious. I think, I can say that I believe Ukraine has made some very strong attacks also. And I don't say that negatively. I think you probably have to. I don't say that negatively. But I think, and he doesn't tell me that, but there have been some explosions in various parts of Russia, and it looks to me like, I don't know, I don't think it came from the Congo. I don't think it came from the United States of America. It possibly came from Ukraine, but I haven't asked that question. Maybe I won't bother asking. You know, they're fighting a war, and we'll see what happens. But I believe it's a war that we have two willing parties, we have two willing countries. They want to see it end. The people of Ukraine want it to end, and the people of Russia want it to end, and the two leaders want it to end. I'm also calling President Putin back after the meeting, and we'll continue a negotiation. Pretty complex, but not that complex.
Can you meet the New Year's Day deadline?
I don't have deadlines. You know what my deadline is? Getting the war ended. We don't have deadlines. You agree with that?
I need to tell you about what just happened at Mar-a-Lago between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky, because it was one of the most disgraceful displays of American betrayal I've ever witnessed. Trump literally threw reporters out of the dining room. Yes, he held this meeting with a foreign leader in a dining room, which is already disrespectful, and then proceeded to blame Ukraine equally with Russia for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let me say that again slowly. Trump blamed Ukraine for being invaded by Russia. The scene started with Trump deciding reporters needed to leave. He said to them, "You want some food? You want some food? Why don't you go take some food? Oh, or are you going to call it a bribe? Get out of here." While he's flanked by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner and other Putin bootlickers, he's throwing the American media out so they can't properly cover this meeting. Think about the symbolism of that. The President of the United States is meeting with the leader of a country being brutally invaded by Russia, and he doesn't want American journalists documenting what's being said. Then Trump holds a very short press conference with Zelensky, where he basically equates Ukraine's defense of itself with Russia's aggression. A reporter asked Trump about Russia's recent attacks on Kyiv, on civilian centers throughout Ukraine, asking if this escalation shows Putin isn't serious about peace. And Trump's response was stunning. No, he's very serious. I think, I can say that I believe Ukraine has made some very strong attacks also. And I don't say that negatively. I think you probably have to. But there have been some explosions in various parts of Russia. And it looks to me like, I don't think it came from the Congo. I don't think it came from United States of America. It possibly came from Ukraine. Let's be clear about what he's doing here. Ukraine has been targeting military infrastructure inside Russia. Ammunition depots, military bases, command centers. That's legitimate warfare when you're defending yourself from an invasion. Russia has been targeting civilian populations, residential buildings, hospitals, schools, energy infrastructure during winter to freeze people. These are not equivalent actions. One is a country defending itself by hitting military targets. The other is war crimes and crimes against humanity. And Trump is saying they're basically the same thing, that both sides are equally responsible. By the way, I am trying to do my best to gather all the information I can for you and share it with you. Please leave your likes and comments, and I would be grateful if you subscribed. Let's continue. This is treasonous. There's no other word for it. Trump is taking Russia's side against a country that's fighting for its survival against an authoritarian aggressor. He's providing propaganda talking points that Russia can use to justify its continued assault. He's undermining Ukraine's position in any negotiations by suggesting they're equally culpable. And he's doing all of this while while coordinating directly with Putin. Because that's the other jaw-dropping revelation from this press conference. Trump spoke with Putin this morning before meeting with Zelensky, and he's planning to call Putin again after the meeting. He put out a social media post saying, "I just spoke with Putin. It was very productive." So Trump gets his marching orders from Putin, then meets with Zelensky while surrounded by Putin bootlickers like Witkoff and Kushner, throws out American journalists so there's no independent record of what's said, then calls Putin again afterward to report back. That's not diplomacy. That's Trump acting as Putin's agent, coordinating with Moscow to pressure Ukraine into surrendering territory. And when a reporter asked if Trump could meet his New Year's Day deadline for a deal, Trump said, "I don't have deadlines. You know what my deadline is? Getting the war ended. We don't have deadlines." This from the man who promised during the campaign that he'd end the war in 24 hours. Remember that? He said over and over that he'd solve this immediately, that it would be easy. Now it's the most difficult of 8 wars he claims to have settled, which is itself a complete lie because he hasn't settled any wars. Trump actually said, "I settled 8 wars and this is the most difficult one. I thought it would be in the middle of the pack." Middle of the pack. That's how he's talking about a war where hundreds of thousands of people have died, where entire cities have been destroyed, where children are freezing in Kyiv right now because Russia is targeting energy infrastructure in the middle of winter. He's talking about it like it's a business deal that's taking longer than expected to close. And when a reporter asked what kind of security guarantees Trump would provide Ukraine, his response was, "What a dumb question. Nobody even knows what the security agreement is going to say." Think about that. If you don't know what the security agreement will say, what exactly are you discussing? Isn't the entire point of these negotiations to establish security guarantees so Ukraine isn't just left defenseless after being pressured to give up territory? But Trump can't answer that because he doesn't have an answer. He just wants Ukraine to surrender land to Russia and hopes some vague promises about European involvement will make it sound like there's a real plan. Trump also tried to sell this surrender to Zelensky as an economic opportunity. He said, "There are great economic benefits for Ukraine also, because there's a lot of rebuilding to do and there's a lot of wealth to be had. They have great wealth potentially. They have great wealth." This is how Trump thinks the world works. Everything is transactional. You want money, you want economic benefits, just give Putin what he wants, and maybe you'll get paid later. He can't comprehend that Ukraine is fighting for its existence, for its sovereignty, for its right to exist as an independent nation. All he sees is a deal to be made where he can claim credit. But here's what Trump doesn't understand or doesn't care about. Russia doesn't want a deal. Russia wants total victory. Putin has said explicitly through his officials and state media that these lands belong to Russia, that Ukraine isn't a real country, that this is a special operation that will continue until Russia's goals are achieved. Those goals include not just eastern Ukraine, but eventually all of Ukraine and influence over Europe. Marco Rubio, who Trump appointed Secretary of State, even explained that what Russia calls a peace process is actually a special operation against all of the West. Russia's goal is to force the U.S. and Europe to pressure Ukraine while Russia continues fighting and preparing for a new phase. And that's exactly what Trump is facilitating. He's driving a wedge between the U.S. and Europe. You have Ukraine, Canada, Europe, and Australia as an alliance supporting Ukraine's defense and sovereignty. And you have the U.S. under Trump acting neutral, or worse, acting as Russia's advocate. Trump should be pro-Ukraine and pro-allies, but instead, he's a Putin bootlicker who's undermining the entire Western alliance. The contrast in how Trump treats these leaders couldn't be more stark. When Zelensky arrived in Florida, there was no one there to greet him except the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States. No honor guard, no ceremony. Just meet me in the dining room and I'll get you some food like you're here for lunch. But when Putin visits, Trump rolls out the red carpet and has United States military personnel get down on their knees for him. One of the most disgraceful photos in American history shows our military on their knees for a foreign dictator because Trump demanded it. Outside Mar-a-Lago during this meeting, there were dozens and dozens of pro-Ukraine supporters with Ukrainian flags, calling out Trump for aiding and abetting the massacre of children, women, and innocent people in Ukraine. And they're right. While Trump is in there having a cozy dinner meeting with Zelensky and Putin's representatives, people in Kyiv are freezing because Russia has destroyed their energy infrastructure. There's video from Kyiv showing the reality. Dark, cold, people huddling for warmth while bombs continue to fall on civilian areas. Russia has significantly increased its bombings of civilian populations under Trump's presidency. They're escalating because they know Trump will give them cover, will blame both sides equally, will pressure Ukraine to surrender rather than hold Russia accountable. And Trump's response to this escalation is to say Ukraine is just as responsible and to coordinate with Putin on how to pressure Zelensky into accepting defeat. Zelensky and Europe have been calling Trump's bluff in a smart way. They've said, okay, you want us to give up territories in eastern Ukraine? Let's put it to a public referendum and let the people in those territories vote. But first, let's agree to a 60 or 90-day ceasefire. Ukraine has always been agreeable to ceasefires. Russia is not, because Putin doesn't want peace. He wants conquest. He wants total victory. And every time Ukraine proposes something reasonable that would actually test whether these territories want to be part of Russia, Putin changes the goalposts because this was never about liberating Russian speakers. It was about destroying Ukraine as an independent nation. That's what really happened at today's meeting. Trump, coordinating with Putin, tried to pressure Zelensky into accepting a surrender deal dressed up as a peace agreement. The economic benefits pitch, the vague security guarantees, the blame on both sides for the violence. It's all designed to make Ukraine giving up territory sound reasonable when it's actually capitulation to an aggressor who won't stop there. And throughout all of this, look at Trump's hands in the video. Both hands are discolored with makeup on them, which is its own bizarre detail that makes you wonder what's going on with him physically. But more importantly, look at his demeanor, his confusion about basic questions, his inability to articulate any actual plan beyond we're going to get a deal done. This is not competent diplomacy. This is a compromised president working on behalf of a foreign dictator to undermine an American ally. The fact that Trump threw reporters out before they could document more of this meeting tells you he knows what he's doing is indefensible. The fact that he coordinated with Putin before and after meeting with Zelensky tells you whose interests he's actually serving. The fact that he's blaming Ukraine for defending itself against an invasion tells you he's completely abandoned any pretense of supporting democracy and sovereignty. And the fact that he's doing all of this while people freeze in Kyiv and children die from Russian bombs tells you he has no moral compass whatsoever. This is what American betrayal looks like. This is what happens when you elect someone who's more loyal to Vladimir Putin than to American values, American allies, or basic human decency. Zelensky came to Mar-a-Lago hoping maybe Trump could be convinced to support Ukraine's position. Instead, he got a dining room meeting, a lecture about economic benefits, and a president who's actively working against Ukrainian interests in coordination with the dictator trying to destroy his country. That's the reality of Trump's foreign policy. Serve Putin, betray allies, lie about it all, and hope Americans are too distracted to notice or care. But we're noticing, and we're documenting every single betrayal for history and hopefully for accountability when this nightmare is finally over.